So a few days ago, I realized how out of touch I was with most of my viewers. I don't know any of you. You could be trolls or axe murderers in your private time, and I wouldn't know. So if you're on the fence, though, between being an axe murderer and being a troll, you're not quite sure what you want to do with your life, I would encourage you to be an axe murderer, because then at least you're getting out there and you're actually making something of yourself. Okay, I was kidding. You don't want to be a troll or an axe murderer. And so in this video, I'm going to be talking about probably the most important trait you need to develop to avoid becoming either one of those things, and that is Stoicism. I want to mention first that this video was made on request of one of my viewers, Rand New 2090. He seems like a nice guy. He always puts thought-provoking and nice comments, on many of my videos. And so when he posted that comment asking for a Stoicism video, I wanted to go ahead and make one for him. That being said, we are going to go ahead and get started. Before I do, though, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Helps the channel to grow, helps me to reach more people. So let's go ahead and define Stoicism. Stoicism, I'm going to use the definition that I use in my life that I think is a good thing, a good goal to have. Stoicism it's not having emotions. It can often appear that way, but it's not that you don't have emotions. I think being a less emotional person can help with it, but it's not necessary. It's controlling your emotions and making sure that you are in charge, like keeping your brain in charge of the way you act, right? Not letting your emotions overpower you, and not letting them be what dictates how you act around other people, the choices you make in your life, etc., etc. Now, Stoicism is important for everybody, especially men. I'm going to get to that in a second, but it's important for everyone for two reasons. The first is that when you let your emotions run what you do, you often do unacceptable things. And I'll get to that unacceptable in a minute, what I mean by unacceptable, but you do things that you should not do. The second thing is when you're letting your emotions run you, even if you don't necessarily go out there and do unacceptable things in your job or in your tasks that you have, you typically perform poorly when you're letting your emotions do the work and you're not keeping them in check and holding yourself together with your brain. So here's why that Stoicism is especially important for men. And they're each related to the two reasons that I just said. So doing unacceptable things, men, when they flip out emotionally, those unacceptable things they do tend to be a lot worse than what women do when they emotionally flip out. For instance, the unacceptable thing a woman typically does when she emotionally flips out is just start yelling or screaming at people while uncontrollably crying, okay? And that's obviously a socially unacceptable thing to do, but it doesn't typically cause any major harm to anyone. Now, it actually can in certain circumstances. That's a topic for another channel, though, or another episode at least. But in general, it doesn't lead to any major harm for anyone. When a man flips out, he's more likely to beat someone up, attack somebody. After all, what is 95% of domestic abuse cases but a man who couldn't control his emotion of anger towards his wife? You need to have a lid on. You need to be able to control your emotions so that you don't beat somebody up or attack someone, which is about the worst thing, one of the worst things you could do. The second reason is that men's roles often have higher consequences for emotionally flipping out. Not always. Women do get into high stress situations, and they do get into high stress situations where flipping out causes major problems, but I think it's more likely for men. The most obvious example is war, where if you flip out and you're not controlling yourself mentally, then you could make a mistake that could cause you to die, could cause your platoon to all die, especially if you're an officer, your platoon, your company, your brigade, and so on down the line. Just being able to stay in the game, right? Not let your emotions override you is going to be important to making decisions that could mean life or death. And that's not just war, because most men are not soldiers, but a lot of other jobs as well. Construction sites, if you're not on top of things, someone could receive serious injury or death. That's not just construction, but also the case in things like mining. Lumberjacks, I believe, actually have the highest injury rate of any job. A lot of jobs like that. I think manufacturing is probably to a smaller degree, but still definitely manufacturing. A lot of different trade-related jobs. Anything that involves heavy machinery or large amounts of physical power being applied to something. Those jobs often have very high consequences for not keeping your head in the game, for letting your emotions run you. And then this is also somewhat the case in business as well, even white-collar jobs. There's not so much physical risk, but major financial risk. People could be made or broken. 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures are often on the stake. Are often on the line, right, in different business dealings. And so being able to navigate that and not do something stupid is going to be important to making sure that whatever deal or whatever else it is that you're working on goes through. Again, women are also faced with high-stress situations, but I think that this is more common, at least for men, so it's especially important that men learn how to regulate their emotions under these high-stress situations. I think it's also worth mentioning, I'm sure there are plenty of guys who aren't Catholic watching this, but this is a Catholic channel. So if you if you need another reason to want to get in charge of your emotions, oftentimes letting your emotions run you can be a sin in and of itself. I mean, we know that anger can be a sin. Feeling hateful thoughts towards other people and entertaining them, right? Not putting them to the side. Because what is that? That is intellect versus emotion, right? Your emotion is that you feel very negative thoughts towards someone. And you want to continue feeling those negative thoughts. And your intellect is saying, no, this is wrong, right? I have to, shine the light of Christ. I have to... even if I don't feel positively about this person, I need to treat this person well. And so it is an emotional versus intellectual conflict, and you have to go with intellectual there. To go with the emotional is actually a sin. And what is lust? But I mean, I'm not sure if lust really counts as an emotion, but like it kind of does, right? It's a hormonal feeling that you get towards someone that is... So it's a feeling, right? It's not a logical conclusion. So yeah, lust is kind of an emotion, and lust is a sin. And so you need to be able to, again, the battle of the emotion versus the intellect. The emotion saying, I want to objectify this person, and I want to think about having sex with them, or think about them in an otherwise unchaste way, and then the intellect saying, no, that's wrong, and you have to go with what the intellect says, not with what the emotion says. So these are sins. In some cases, these can be mortal sins, and so you need to be able to regulate your emotions with your intellect. Okay, so how do you go from being emotional, overly emotional, perhaps even sinfully emotional, to being stoic? Well, I'm going to give you my best advice. It might not be the greatest, because I would say that I went from being primarily motivated by emotions to being primarily motivated by intellect between the ages of 12 and 15. So it was just part of getting older for me. A lot of people, though, find themselves in this boat further on down the road, 18, 19, 20. You're still finding yourself primarily emotionally motivated. So what do you do? What do you do if that's you? Well, I think one guiding principle is give everything its due. Don't give anything more than its due. Don't give anything less than its due, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about people who tend to give things more emotional weight than they're due. So, what do I mean by this? Things, events, happenings, disagreements, disputes, etc., they all deserve, by their nature, a certain amount of emotional engagement. And you have to and that emotional engagement might be 0 or it might be 100%. And you need to figure out what each situation you come across deserves. Here's an example. We'll talk about disagreements, because disagreements often cause emotional outbursts and sometimes cause emotional it causes people to just flip out. And so I'll use a disagreement here as an example. Let's say you disagree with someone about who would win in a fight between Batman and Superman. This argument is not serious, right? It's a hypothetical. It's an impossible hypothetical because neither Batman nor Superman exist. It doesn't represent any serious intellectual difference between you and the other person. So what is due in that argument? Just friendly conversation, right, is what that is due. There is no serious emotions that should be displayed during that kind of conversation. Now, a lot of people will say that, of course, Superman versus Batman is dumb, right? Like no one's getting emotionally upset over that in the adult world. Okay, maybe, but people do get emotionally upset over things on that level, right? That should not be a major source of argument or emotional energy. It shouldn't be something that you invest emotional energy into. For instance, I've seen arguments on the internet where there's some guy on YouTube, I don't know what his name is. One of his things is he thinks that very few people, or at least much fewer than currently, should drive pickup trucks. He doesn't like pickup trucks. And so a lot of people will respond to that. And by the way, I am a pickup truck owner, for those who don't know, just so you understand what I think about this issue. A lot of people will respond by accusing him of being gay, accusing him of being a wuss, accusing him of being a hippie, accusing him of being a weak man whose wife goes around and cheats on him. Just saying all these nasty things. Clearly, they're letting their emotions drive them in this case, because otherwise they wouldn't be saying these nasty things. They would just be disputing his points. And they're saying all these nasty things about him because he doesn't like pickup trucks. Guess what? It doesn't matter whether or not you like pickup trucks. Okay, I drive a pickup truck. If you don't like my pickup truck, I don't care if you don't like my pickup truck. I'm not going to get into a 3-hour-long emotional argument with you. Now, I suppose if it comes to a serious policy proposal, then I might have a 3-hour debate with you over it. But I'm certainly never going to be calling you names or saying nasty things about you because you don't like my vehicle. I don't like your sedan. Oh well, right? It's it doesn't matter. Driving a pickup truck versus a sedan does not constitute an actual intellectual difference. That's just vehicle preference. Another example will be, it's very popular today among some people, to crap on country music, okay, and talk about how bad country music is. And a lot of people love country music. I love country music. Not too much into new country music, but in my area, country music is the bomb, including new country music, which is typically what gets attacked the most. And so, guess what? If you don't like Luke Bryan, no one said you had to like Luke Bryan, right? But if someone else doesn't like Luke Bryan, they don't have to like Luke Bryan. You don't need to get into a big argument about whether country music is good or bad. People will get into emotional arguments about music, about what kind of music is best, typically whether country music is good or not. That is not something that deserves a big long argument. I like country music. I play Waylon Jennings like every day. I listen to Waylon Jennings almost every single day. I love country music, especially old country music. But if you don't like country music, I'm not going to sit here and yell at you about how you hate rural people or stuff like that. I'm not going to get into that argument with you because that's probably not accurate. Right, that's just a dumb argument to have. That's a waste of everyone's time because there's no actual intellectual difference between saying I like country music or I like rock music or rap music or what have you. That being said, there are plenty of disagreements that do deserve your emotional energy, like the topic of abortion, especially from the conservative perspective. The conservative understanding of this issue is that we have people going around killing babies that are in the womb. They're committing murder. Of course, this is a major issue, right? Of course, we want to ban this, and of course, we're willing to participate in 4-hour impassioned debates. Of course, we're willing to go to marches. Of course, we're willing to, engage with counter-protesters and things like that. And of course, we're willing to devote our emotional energy to that subject because that is a serious intellectual difference between someone who supports abortion and someone who doesn't, right? That's a difference of like should we allow killing babies? That's huge. That's huge. That is a huge dispute, and that is one that deserves our emotional attention. What kind of vehicle do you drive does not deserve your emotional attention, So make sure you're able to differentiate between those two different types of arguments. You're learning to regulate your emotions. You're learning to not go ballistic on things that don't matter and actually save your energy for things that do. And that's part of what controlling emotions is all about. But giving everything its due doesn't only apply to arguments. It applies to events around you as well. One of the worst things you can do is let negative emotions overpower you when something undesirable happens. Let me just give an example. Let's say that so around where I live, we've had a ton of spring weather recently, lots of storms, lots of floods. So let's say that you go to college in Houston. Okay, I'll just say there are plenty of colleges in Houston, so I won't say which one. It can be whichever one you want. You go to college in Houston, and your family lives in Dallas, okay? So you're driving from Houston to Dallas, and then this big storm happens somewhere in North Texas, and I-45 is all flooded, and you can't get home, so you have to spend the night in Corsicana, and you don't have any money for a hotel, so you have to just sleep in your car. How much emotional energy do you think you should be investing in this situation? It's pretty significant. Most of you have probably not often slept in a car. Maybe even most of you probably haven't ever slept in a car. But you shouldn't invest much emotional energy in that. You should just, it happened, right? Just put your seat back and sleep for 12 hours or however long, 8 hours, 6 hours, however long you sleep for. Just sleep in your car. And if you don't get any sleep that night, then just drive up and, sleep when you get home. Don't invest more emotional energy in that situation than is actually due to it. Because what are you going to get out of being emotional about that situation? Either way, you're winding up in the same place. You're sleeping in your car. The only difference is if you're not emotional about it, you might actually get a better chance of getting to sleep, right? So, yeah, don't worry, don't care, right? Don't care. Don't waste your emotional energy on something like that. You know, it is what it is. You know, deal with the problem. And I know this because, like, I think women do this more than men do, and maybe that's why it's so important for men to develop this. But, like, my grandmother, she will stay up till 12 a.m. at night in her bed thinking, what on earth am I going to do? I have 8 people coming to my house, and we only have 6 twin beds and 1 couch, and someone's going to have to sleep on the floor. She will stay up till midnight worrying about that. Do you know how long I would worry about that for? My head would hit the pillow and I would fall asleep either way. And when they come, someone would have to sleep on the floor. Maybe I would sleep on the floor. Maybe I would give my bed up for somebody. But, like, it is what it is, right? It is what it is. Don't worry about stuff. Don't get invested in things. Now, there are things that you should be invested in, things that you can actually make a difference in. And you should invest your emotional energy towards fixing those problems. But make sure that you're always keeping a lid on your emotions. You're making sure that that you're using them to do something constructive, not just basking there in your misery and complaining about stuff. Because obviously there are a lot of videos out there right now about people, Gen Zers especially, complaining about the situation that they live in. And I'm not saying that complaining doesn't have its uses. Mostly complain to people who could help you. But in general, what do you get out of complaining, right? It's like you're still in the same situation. You're not making your situation any better by talking about how bad it is. So just don't dwell on negative situations. Just charge forward. It's all you can do. Now I'm going to talk some about expressing your emotions, because a lot of people might be sitting there and I'm just saying, you know, don't care, don't worry, don't think about it, just go. And they're like, how can I do that, right? Some of you might be sitting here thinking, like, how can I not worry about this problem that presents itself? How can I get over this? Because the way my brain works, I just want to think about it, and I want to keep getting more worried and anxious and emotional about all these things that I shouldn't be getting emotional over. Well, the best way you can start is by not expressing those emotions, by just keeping a lid on them, even if you're feeling them very strongly. And eventually, with time, you can get to a point where, you know, if you control your emotions, they're not as strong anymore, right? If you keep a lid on them over time, you can get to a point where they're just not as strong anymore. They don't cause you as much trouble. And so expressing your emotions is very important. Now, how exactly you should express your emotions is something of a question, because like for me, I remember the last time I cried, it was about 3 years ago. My dog died and I felt somewhat responsible. That's a story for another time, but basically I felt that I had reached a very low point. I thought that I had set my advancement towards manhood back several years, you know, and that I had acted like a kid in the situation that my dog was in when it died, and that if I had acted differently, I could have saved the dog. And so I felt very bad about myself. I was in a very low point, and I cried that night. I cried for a long time that night, and that was the last time I cried. I was probably about 15, so three and a half years ago. At the same time, I know people who cry. I know men who cry at least once a year, maybe more, who I would never call like wussy, weak men. You know, I have respect for the people I'm talking about. One example would be my uncle. So he cried, the last time I remember him crying, and he probably cries much more than this, you know, because I only see him once every few months. But the last time I remember seeing him cry was at his 50th birthday. His wife made this video montage for him that had all these people that he knew, some of whom he hadn't seen in 10 years. And each one of them recorded this video about how much they loved him and how great they thought he was and just what an amazing man he was and all that. And so I guess that was like her birthday present to him, getting all these people to do this video. And he saw all these people, family, friends, like I said, some who he hadn't seen in a long time, all saying all these nice things about him. And he cried at the end of that video. Now, he wasn't like, it was a more dignified crying. He wasn't just sitting there bawling, but he had tears coming down. He was very touched by that. And I know he had cried a couple years earlier at his son's graduation. Like, he's just more emotionally expressive than me. I would never accuse him of being like a weak man for that. I know him. I respect him highly. He's more of a man than I am. I'll say that in his defense, And so what exactly your emotional expression is going to be is different for different people. You may cry fairly often. You may be more like me, and you probably cry like once every few years at the most. And so I'm not trying to say exactly what it is, but I do think as men we should be more reserved about our crying than women. And the reason I say this is because a lot of women don't do this, to be fair. Like, my mom does not cry very often. She probably cries more like as often as I cry, like once every few years. But I do think in general women cry fairly frequently. And so when you see a woman crying, I would say that sometimes the emotional weight of the situation isn't all that amplified when a woman cries. Women cry for all kinds of things. And so when you as a man, when men are more reserved about their crying, then when they do cry, that adds emotional weight to the event. Like, let's take for example, a daughter, and her dad almost never cries, right? She may have hardly, if ever, seen him cry. But then he cries at her wedding, and that lets her understand like how big of a deal this is for him. And so, yeah, just that the fact that men cry less, if you control your emotional expression, then when you do express your emotions, then it becomes a much bigger thing. Anyway, that's what I got. So, like always, I'm going to end this video with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord, thank you for the gift of masculinity, and please help us as we go from young boys to young men, to live in ways that please you, and that we might always seek to serve you and others. Help us to always put others second, you first. Help us to always put you first, and then others second, and then ourselves last. And help us to manifest this in our emotions. Help us to control our desires and the way we feel about certain things, and be sure to regulate those passions in ways that are in accordance with your will, that benefit others, and to help make ourselves more holy people and grow closer to you. We ask this in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. That's all I got for today. So go ahead and like and subscribe if you haven't already. And y'all have a good day.